Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to the BlackUSA.News Donnie Glover Show. And we are fortunate today. Is this a, excuse me, are you watching the Olympics?
Who, me?
Okay, we're here to talk about tourism today. Tourism. Michael Haynie, how have you been? First of
Yeah,
all, top of the morning to you.
thanks a lot, Donnie. I actually was watching the Olympics. It was a phenomenal piece done on the young lady, the black young lady from Ocala, Florida, who was the first gold medalist to ever win, first black gold medalist to win in speed skating, man. Phenomenal story, phenomenal background. They showed a piece of her on skates for the very first time, man. So, yeah, so I was watching that. My apologies.
I got to tell you, good morning, Lou Fields. How are you?
Good morning, everybody. How you doing, Mike? How you doing, Mike? How you doing, Donnie?
Lou, my hero.
So, Lou, are you watching these Winter Olympics?
Oh yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I saw the sister wearing something. I think an African American won speed skating. I tried to follow the black folks.
Well, you know, watching the Winter Olympics is just not as attractive as the Summer Olympics. I mean, let me ask you, Sha'Carri Richardson says there's a double standard.
Of course there is. Well, historically, Donnie, as a historian, there's always going to be a double standard when you have a majority group that oversees a minority group, or a minority group that oversees a majority group.
Lou, I got a new rule for the Olympics. Unless you've competed in the event, you can't be a judge. Unless you've competed in the events, you ought not be able to be a commentator. I'm going back to the Summer Olympics, and I'm watching these beautiful young ladies run a track meet, but and these were mostly African American women, and then I'm seeing these all white guys with the gun, said ready, start, set, go, and they make them wait there so long on the starting block.
And the whole story.
And I'm saying to myself, if they had run that race themselves, they wouldn't let anyone stay in the ready position that long.
I think the main thing is to understand
new rules.
We have to try to understand what we can control, and anything that we don't own and create, we definitely can't control. Look at the football field. The players
own the Olympics. I thought the Olympics were owned by the world.
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not.
No.
No, of course not. Of course not. And if you look at what happened with the young lady Simone Biles during the other Olympics, and things that happened to those young ladies that's been kept under the wraps, under covers.
I'm sorry, Mike. Why are the Olympics never in Africa?
Hey, Donnie, that's a great question. I had an opportunity the other day to watch a national or international golf tournament in Kenya, in Africa. But you're absolutely right. Maybe they think it's too hot. Who knows? But that's a good question to pose.
It's not too hot to take the gold, the diamonds, the cobalt. What's the stuff that goes in cell phones? It's not too hot for that.
But you're absolutely right, Donnie. I watched the Olympics for, as Lou mentioned, the representation that we have, like the bobsledders from Jamaica that competed again this year. They did fairly well.
What's the name of the game where they push this little ball?
Curling.
Oh my God! Huh?
Curling.
That's not a sport. If that's a sport, they should make snowball fighting a sport.
Yeah. Okay.
Now we would win the gold medal in snowball fighting. New rules. There should be a new. If that little thing called curling is a sport, I mean, what in the hell are they doing?
Hey, Donnie, I thought about what you were saying when I was watching the girls ice hockey U.S. and I looked at the representation. It didn't look like America to me, but you know they do the same thing or did the same thing to tennis before Venus and Serena. You know, they try to do
Althea
the same
Gibson,
thing.
Althea Gibson.
Yeah, Althea Gibson, you know, so I look at ice hockey. I say there's no way that we can't participate in that sport if allowed to. You know, and then there's a cost to entry that they look at as well. And you know, the
Well,
same thing for these.
that's how baseball is. Did you
Yeah,
know a little league bat is $400?
I
Lou
know it's
Fields,
pretty expensive.
Lou Fields, a
Yes.
baseball bat for little league is roughly $400.
Pretty
See,
expensive.
they price you out. That's how they do it. Now, for that hockey, I just want to tell you, this is Black History Month, and it's my understanding that people of color founded this sport in Canada in the 1800s. I mean, who else invented skating backwards?
You
I
got a
just wanted to
point.
pose those questions. You guys are a little slow this morning, so let's get on to the topic at hand. Tourism, tourism here in Baltimore. Oh, let me stop. We had a wonderful discussion yesterday. Members of the Black Press. We spoke with Mayor Scott. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for taking the time to meet with the Black Press. Very important. A 37, 38-year-old young man that has the wisdom, that has the vision just to speak with the Black Press. We appreciate that. And that's how you build a relationship. I mean, you know, I get on Michael Haynie's nerves. And Mike, your view is a little clear. It's a little fuzzy there. Did you know
It's
that?
probably my fuzz. I'm getting old. Let's see if we can't do something about that. If they want to see me, we'll see if we
Yeah,
can't do something about
I
that.
know you're a little more vain than that. But anyway, we had a really good discussion with the mayor. And, you know, unless you talk to someone, you really don't know some things. So we learned some things yesterday that we didn't know. And stay tuned to the multiple Black media outlets for stories that are to come. But on that note, one of the things we did talk about was the CIAA. What does it stand for?
Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association, I believe.
Okay, now normally this CIAA, and this is a huge basketball tournament, right?
Well, that's the foundation of it.
Okay, and it was typically held in the South, deep South?
It was in Baltimore in 1951, but for the last 15 years, it's been in Charlotte.
And they left Charlotte because CIAA said that people were not attending the games.
And others, outsiders, particularly national change and promoters, were making big money doing parties.
And other people making money off the parties precluded people, somehow stop people from coming to the games. Is that what the gripe or concern was?
Well, we've always been difficult. As I attended Coppin State's ball game last week, it's always been hard for us as people of color to support our own stuff in big numbers. Our Little League, our Pop Warner games, our HBCU games.
I disagree.
They should be packed. They should be full of people. But
well, I got to go to history. The Negro Leagues were doing pretty well. And my understanding is they were doing so well that members from the majority community came and started clipping off players. Kind of like Neon Deion Sanders is doing today, just the reverse, kind of like Robin Hood.
But the Negro League ball players did not have an easy go of it. It was a tough time for them. And the games were exciting, but that does not necessarily mean it was a good day. They had hardships playing baseball in the area and the way in which they had to play. They couldn't stay in hotels. They couldn't eat in restaurants. It was hard for them to get financial compensation, even when they left the Negro League going to the majors. But I did want to stop for a moment before we go much further. Give me a second. One of our talk show hosts, I've been a talk show host for 6 years, and I wasn't invited to the press conference with the mayor, but that's another story. But today I'd like to bring up the name of Chaplain Mike Jensen, another radio show host who's being funeralized tomorrow. His viewing is today at Wiley Funeral Service, 9200 Liberty Road. But I think what we look at historically, we get bits and pieces of history. And when we look at something like you say, CIAA, big ado, 100,000 people, $50 million impact. The question becomes, well, who is the recipient, not just of the gains and the championships and the parties, but who are the recipients of that economic revenue of $50 million? Where's that going to end up at? That's the question we have to look at in a city like Baltimore.
So, Lou, I definitely agree with you. I ran the headquarter hotel. I was in Charlotte for 2 years of the CIAA conference, and I ran the Sheraton Airport Plaza, which was a headquarter hotel at that point. And to what Doni is saying, it's the money around the actual physical game. The game is just you know, just a
Draw.
microcosm of what it is for what the real economic impact is. And the same thing Baltimore, I believe, may see as well. It's just a matter of whether that economic impact will penetrate the communities that look like ours, as they did in Charlotte.
What I'd like to address, just want to get straight to the jugular, are African Americans who are in position to help other African Americans. Majority society members, from my experience, sort of expect African Americans who are in position to help other African Americans. What's not happening there, Mike?
Well, I think it's a matter, Donnie, as I've said countless times, is that do we have real power or do we have apparent power? You know, when you look at the structure in Baltimore, I always believe that our politicians have apparent power. You know, they don't have the real power of the businesses and the personalities that really own Baltimore. So they allow us to have certain positions politically. But when it comes to the economic aspect, when they talk about real estate and economic impact, you better believe they make sure that theirs is off the top and whatever's left over, the crumbs, we can have. So you look at a Brandon Scott, you look at a Al Hutchinson, you look at Shalonda Stokes, you look at Sanjay Dakar, you look at Bon Whiting, the people who are around the CIAA conference, and they really want to achieve things for our community. But at the end of the day, look where DJ Kid Rock is at. He's at Hard Rock Cafe. You know, that's where they are. That's what happens. And it's not because they don't want to, it's because we don't have real power.
Come on in, Lou Fields. We don't want to bore you.
Well, I had the occasion to be invited to the 100th anniversary of the creation of the Royal Theater. It was on this past Tuesday. And what we see is when
where was this? That's just around the corner from me, Lou. You said you didn't hear about the Black Media meeting. I didn't hear about this thing right around the corner from me. What are you talking about?
I heard about it.
It was held on Tuesday, and the point, it was celebrating 100 years. And I got the word late on Monday, so I went down there on Tuesday, but I went to the monument, the Royal Theater.
Where?
The Avenue Bakery. But my point is,
are you talking about Jim Hamlin?
Yeah, he held at his spot, and it was the 100th anniversary. And we can talk about political power.
At the bakery?
Yes. And
I don't even know when the damn thing is open. When is it open?
Very early in the morning and close early in the afternoon.
Oh, well, look here, man. Okay.
And you take a lot of vacation. But the bigger point, as what Mr. Haynie is talking about, but first, as an aside note, the first thing, as Mr. Haynie is talking about, when he mentioned all those people of color, the insiders, they are inside and they have the influence, if used as a collective, all of these big events wouldn't be happening at the white institutions. When we saw the 100th anniversary of the Royal Theater, an elected official, the number 2 most powerful elected official in the city council president, he shows up to the avenue, as Kirk Smoke may have not done, and O'Malley came up, Dixon came up, Blake came up, Jack Young came up. They all come up with
You
words.
say Smoke came to the Avenue.
Yeah, but none of them bought, other than Smoke, he was the last one to bring some money.
Smoke was the last one. I misunderstood what you said. I couldn't let, you know,
And
me and Mr. Smoke didn't agree about the trifecta between UB Coppin and BCCC, but in terms of Sandtown, he paid more attention here than all of them combined. As a matter of fact, when the mayor came in after him, who's that lad from Montgomery County? He came in and cut all of the money coming to West Baltimore, and we believe it went over to East Baltimore.
and
Shame on you.
what happened at these events, the mayors show up, but they bring paper, like a resolution. Normally, if you have something that's 100 years old and you're trying to rebuild it, the mayor says, I'm going to bring a check. And it's normally an oversized check so they can do the big, photo press release and saying, okay, in celebration of this 100th anniversary, I'm not only bringing you a nice citation, but here's $100,000 to go towards what you're trying to do up here.
See, I live here, Lou, and I'm here to tell you, politicians don't come through here. They have concluded, black politicians, first and foremost, have concluded they don't need the votes from this area. Keith Haynes did it like that. Pete Welch did it like that. And don't make me name more names. They don't come here unless we call them up on the phone and tell them, we're holding their relatives hostage next door.
The main thing is we got to know where the pot of money is. If, in fact, the CIAA create a $50 million revenue stream, some of it will go into the city's general fund. But some of those funds could be the funds utilized to revitalize Sandtown, Pennsylvania Avenue, Greenmount Avenue, Emerson Avenue. We need to find ways that says when we have Light City, when we have Baltimore Book Fest, when we have Artscape, when we have now CIAA, and it creates all this revenue, there should be a designated point where some of those funds would go to help the citizens of the city. In this case, with CIAA, got to give them some credit. Visit Baltimore, not one of my favorite organizations over there. I'm going to tell you straight up.
Why?
Why? They are the monopoly. Schaefer gave them a monopoly on tourism dollars as it relates to the city budget.
Well, aren't they headed by an African American?
Well, black faces in high places sometimes don't equate to power. It equates to self power. But if you look at what I'm saying now,
Are you serious? In 2022, we have African Americans who are not looking out for others. Mike Haynie, say it's not so.
Yeah, well, when you look at the CIAA conference in itself, looking out for others, and you look at the sponsorship list, Coca-Cola, Lowe's, Under Armour, and I can go on and on. Where is their allegiance? It's almost like having a chocolate covered nut. We're the chocolate on the outside, but the real treat is the nut underneath, and that's what we're getting, a bit of the outside. So they have taken and they have created an economy superficially, they think, for blacks, right? So I've asked Visit Baltimore for a number of years to do a quantifiable economic impact study of tourism on the black community and black businesses. And I hope this is the impetus, the CIAA conference, because they put so much into it and they have promoted it as one that would do a multitude of things for our community in Baltimore, that they do an economic impact study formally so that we can look at the numbers, see the numbers, make decisions futuristically on how we impact black businesses if we care. If we care. If we don't care, we will not see that impact study as we do every year for tourism in general in the city, in the state, and the country. Okay? But the people that run the game, look at the CIAA. No one of those businesses, with the exception, I think, of one small one that they put up there strategically, look like us. And that's who owns the economic engine.
Hey, Lou, I don't mean to bore you. Lou, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's writing a book.
Okay, well, give us the same respect you would give CNN. What is the problem here in Baltimore, Lou?
Now, hold up for a minute, please. I am pulling up the Baltimore.org CIAA site so we can talk about what's on their site as relates to what Mr. Haynie just said about
Okay.
who's sponsored. I'm pulling the
Yeah.
site up over
I knew what you were
Okay.
doing, Lou, because I've been doing the same thing, but I got it kind of memorized because,
here.
I know how important I've got it memorized, man, in terms of what's going on. And, effort does not equate to results. And, I got to tell you, I have a hell of a lot of respect for Al Hutchinson, Shalonda Stokes, and for Sanjay, who was the first black vendor to get a piece of business off of this CIAA conference, whose mantra is to ensure that there is inclusion. And then you look at some legislation, Donnie, that Antonio Hayes wrote. Antonio Hayes wrote a bill specific to this conference championship and this 5-day period that were gatekeepers. And I said, oh my God, I love Antonio, but why are these gatekeepers up here that preclude and prevent minorities from actively participating without having to put some upfront money in that many of them don't have? I think his intention was to make sure that outsiders, i.e. Charlotte, Raleigh, didn't come in and penetrate the market. But what it did, it was a prohibitor to local black businesses because they don't necessarily have the scratch to put down for liquor license, to have imagery of CIAA advertisements, because everything is, not only commercialized, it's monetized, man. And that's the issue with our businesses. We don't have capital to be equal to many of these, other businesses that do. It was a setup.
Yes, I just pulled it up just on the website. The very first event for CIAA is this Saturday. And it's going to be at the Under Armour House at Fayette Street, right there across from the post office, 1100 East Fayette. It goes from 8 to 3. They're bringing in Earl the Pearl, Bobby Dandridge, Baltimore Bullets, and the commissioner, Jackie McWilliams. And what happens, what Mike was talking about, is the infrastructure. If the infrastructure is not already in place for a small company, not small, but for a company like mine, BBH Tours, if the infrastructure is not in place, that I have the capacity to be downtown to offer tour services for up to 10 to 15,000 people, none of which have pre-registered. So if I go about reserving 4 or 5 buses with expectations these buses are going to be filled, and then I put down 9, 10 staff members down there, but without the proper infrastructure that says, just like the city gave $53 million in tourism subsidy to white organizations, they have to help us be prepared to deal with this kind of capacity. And because we don't have the capacity, no black serious restaurants right down there near the Broad Farm, no serious black restaurant near the Baltimore Convention Center. I'm not talking about where you got a little cafe and you can handle 5, 10 people. I'm talking about you need to be ready to have hundreds of people. And the infrastructure is not there. Now, why is that the case?
That's a little harsh there. I mean, when I think of darker than blue,
it gives you that opportunity if you're in that kind of, to have infrastructure.
Lou, darker than blue, they hold every bit of 100 people or so. Next Phase Cafe.
Now, we're talking thousands, man. And then he had to have the staff.
Well, slow down, Lou. You're not being any better than the people we're critiquing. There are no black restaurants that I know of that have 5 seats inside. No restaurant worth its salt is going to stay open serving 5 people. And you got hood fellas.
I said 5 or 6 people coming at the same time, not the number of seats, but
how many white restaurants can handle hundreds of people?
If I could interject for a second, Donnie, to your point, I think what Lou is saying, there's a mile radius of the convention center or the inner harbor that statistical data shows
within that 1 mile ought to be getting attention. Period. End of story. And it shouldn't be a little flyer going out with 4 or 5 names. I can't believe in the city of Baltimore with well over 100 black restaurants, there isn't a list of every damn black restaurant. But when I looked at that list, the isms started coming in.
Yeah. But the
Don't
mile radius, Donnie,
if you
the
know
mile
what I'm
radius,
talking about.
how many of them are within that mile radius? Because we don't have the transportation infrastructure to necessarily get them to Terra Cafe and other places. Water for Chocolate, Casey's newly opened restaurant is within manageable distance. They're going to be at the Ivy Hotel, which is owned by, Mr. Brown, for
The
instance,
Ivy
opening
Hotel is
night.
all the way uptown, past all of those black restaurants.
Ivy Hotel is like before,
It's
just after
further
Darker Than Blue.
uptown than all of the black restaurants.
Well, they're going to go there. So my point is that Lou's
Exactly. I live
point.
in Sandtown. You know what they sell around here? They sell dope. And people come from all over the damn country to get the dope. People go where they want to go.
Yeah, well, that may be true, Donnie, but we'll see. We'll see because I believe that it'll be a moderate success of Baltimore showcasing. First of all, you've got the police commissioner, the mayor, and the Visit Baltimore CEO, whose jobs, in my estimation, are on the line, and they have put everything into this because
If
there's a
their
high
job is on the line,
expectation. There's a
whose
high
job?
expectation, huh?
Whose job is on the line?
I believe the police commissioner, the mayor, the Visit Baltimore CEO, they put everything into the CIAA, not from a success perspective of a tournament, but a perception perspective of the city and particularly of the black community and how well they met out, the economic stuff. And that's why I said that it's important that we get measurables afterwards so that we can see exactly, because that's all we've heard about for 4 years is CIAA. Significant money has gone into it, and
Well,
significant commitments have been made to the black community.
actually, I've heard surface stuff. What have you heard for 4 years, Lou?
Well, I took the occasion to go down to Charlotte in the year of 2020, the last year that Charlotte held the conference. And I
Hmm.
went there, uh, giving credit to Mr. Hutchinson. He said, Lou, we got some extra rooms. If you pay your own way, you can have a nice place and you can come down and be a part of the Baltimore experience. Well, when I got there, staff didn't show up. They needed me to not volunteer, but they needed me to man their hospitality table, which I did for 2 days, 2 full shifts. And
Hold
I
up,
got
you had to
Wow.
pay after manning the tables. You still had to pay.
well, I only had to pay for my expenses to get down there and to get back home. My hotel room was covered and they had some bad food, so you could eat that. But after doing it for 2 days, the full shifts, I got a feel for the attendees of CIAA. See, with CIAA, you got a lot of different moving parts. You got the CIAA administration. Then you got the people they hire to run it for them. That's another entity. I think it's called Vanguard, something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And then you have to throw in Visit Baltimore. And then you have to throw in the 13 member institutions. And then the last group, the best group, is the attendees. So from Black Baltimore, and I'm glad to see.
I didn't hear you mention the black businesses though.
Well, that's where I'm going. I said Black Baltimore. The last group, after you talk about who's attending, the next group is the Black businesses in the city that seek to benefit. And to Visit Baltimore's credit, they did create a Black business guide with over maybe about 150 Black businesses, and they're going to give 10,000 away. They also are trying to ask if you want to have a $1,500 table inside the convention center for 4 or 5 days. So the food trucks going to be on Utah Street. So I'm hopeful some of the Black-owned food trucks will be there. When I talked about the infrastructure in tourism, if you don't have the in-place infrastructure, big conventions can come to your town and have no impact outside of the footprint of your hotel and your convention center. In this case, Royal Farms Theater. So if I'm coming in and I got 10 people in my group, and we say, okay, we got a little lunch break, we're not going to walk a mile. How far will we walk to get something to eat is the question. Not a mile. We're not walking a mile. So if it's on Baltimore Street, we ain't walking past what? Saratoga Street? Maybe 2 blocks at the most. And so the infrastructure is where Baltimore is falling short. We don't have it yet. But Shalonda Stokes, give her some credit. At Downtown Partnership, she put together that boost program to put 5 businesses down in Baltimore downtown to show this can be done. But I think what happens now, when people like those you mentioned,
Hey, Lou Fields, 5 businesses are nice, but you talking about 5 businesses in a city of 500,000 people, 5 businesses.
Well, it's a start. It's a start to lose credit, to lose point. I agree. It's a start because before Shalonda got there, because I believe my brother Eric Dotson and his business, Couples Tea, is going to do relatively well because they're in proximity, as Lou mentioned, of that walkable distance. There's a radius that people just won't deal with, Donnie. You know, whether black, pink, or purple. As you say, they may come in to get dope, but that's a need. That may be a disease. That may be a
Okay,
physical aspect of things. But to go get some food, they're going to Capitol Grill. They're going to places that are convenient to them. And to, like Lou said, visit Baltimore's credit, they have a multitude of food truck and stand opportunities, just like Chef Debbie, who you introduced me to, with the phenomenal, the best crab soup in the state. I purposely and took her hand and led her to visit Baltimore and said, hey, hook her up, take care of her. She has the best crab soup in the state, and she has a virtual place. So y'all got to take care of her. So I got to call her later and make sure she's in position to let the world know how good she is. But they've been willing to do things like that. But you have to bring it to the people with this conference that's coming in here now. The hotels.
Lou Fields, is Baltimore ready for business?
Well, and let me tell you about Baltimore.
Because it seems very anti-business.
You better bet it when our senator, chair of the Senate, puts in a bill, Senate Bill 222, to close down businesses. That's bad news. Because of crime, you're going to blame the businesses. No, the business is not down to creating the crime. But I think in Baltimore, we have had.
Hold on. Mike Haynie, could you believe someone tried to close the block?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Who got killed on the block? That's adult entertainment.
But that's anti-business.
The bigger issue is the perception that we can't control a block of business. One block of business less than a half a block from our police headquarters. That's got me in awe. The fact that you can't say, well, if it was true, I'm going to take this because it's in the backdrop of my police headquarters. And if I can't control a half a block away, how am I going to control East Baltimore or West Baltimore or up on Harford Road? You know, so that was more political, I think, with people that want to be judgmental on the type of business. And they figured that this was a way to alleviate Baltimore of its sins, you know, which is unfortunate. But Lou, you know, back to what you were saying, you know, about Baltimore ready for business and tourism and our ability. Someone asked a question in the chat about capital, you know, and I know that you know, I've always said about you, Lou Fields has laid across the wired, the razored barbed wire for black people in this state relative to tourism, who walked across his back as you put your neck out there advocating for tourism dollars for the black community. Even the legislation that we thought the Baltimore City Council was going to pass, right, in the TID, the Tourism Improvement District, you asked for a certain amount of money, right, to be carved out of that, earmarked to give black business capital infusion. And what happened with your people, Lou? How did they, you know, handle that? Your people.
Well, the comptroller of our city, the city council president, and the mayor had an opportunity in July of this year to, as you state, include 7.3% of the Baltimore Tourism Improvement District money, which is now a pot of $10 million. That would have created a pot of $700,000, which could go a long way towards creating what I'm saying, this infrastructure. When the people get downtown right today, I mean, for the CIAA, people like me, we should be empowered to have 10, 15 shuttle buses, 7 passenger, 15 passenger, to pick those folks up and get them to these restaurants, get them to the retail shops. But if the infrastructure is not in place and we are being left out of the funding to create the capacity, we're really sitting here watching things just go by. I can tell you a classic example. In 2017, we had the AKAs, the ACT, that was the black tennis. We had the NAACP. We had just had the Urban League, 2017. But we as people of color, because we haven't tapped into infrastructure, capacity, and equity, we watched millions of our dollars from black people coming to Baltimore in 2017 and go out the door. And if we're not careful, my thing is, how do we make sure the impact hits our black museums, hits our arena players? Why aren't some of our black institutions listed as one of these sites for official CIAA stuff? Because they can't afford to write the check. When I put out my information about we're doing my Black History tours for CIAA, I've been doing it over 20 years, and I've done it for every major group in town. The CIAA brass sent me a note. They said, Mr. Fields, if you want to do tours for our conference and use our name, the fee for you to pay is $10,000.
I told you that. Yep.
That put me right out the game in terms of trying to do. So I'm not going to go down there next week and try to hustle up a penny or a dime here. I'm going to go and put on my spectator hat and go see Earl the Pearl, who built the Royal Farm, go hang out with Charles Oakley, and go watch some good basketball, and don't have the stress of worrying about putting out thousands of dollars, not knowing how many people might even want to go on a tour.
Absolutely, Lou. Absolutely, Lou. And to your point, Lou, Donnie asked the question about is Baltimore ready to do business? You know, and then maybe the question should be modified or quantified. Is Baltimore ready to do business with black people in a city that is over 60% black? And, you know, we have to understand what black business is and what it looks like, because as far as I'm concerned, what we're repositioning for, and I said the word repositioning, right? And particularly in our neighborhoods, is for gentrification to come through this city in the next 10 years that's going to change the dynamics in the face. You know, those 5 businesses that the downtown partnership gave are good faces for the redevelopment of Howard Street, which we know has been on the thing for 20 years. They've been trying to redevelop Howard Street for 20 years, right? 30.
Well, time out. You mentioned Howard Street and you didn't mention Rennie Bass. The Downtown Cultural Arts Center has been a center of black culture on Howard Street for years now.
Guess who wrote the 501c3 for it?
I don't know who.
You looking at it?
Lou.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now let me give you this last point.
Congratulations.
Well, here's a big point. The buzzwords today: diversity, inclusion, equity. We are seeing now diversity begin to happen. Tripling in inclusion. Where we're not seeing is equity. And here's the point I want to make. I said that in this year's budget, Mayor Scott's first budget, there's $53 million for tourism subsidies. Now, let me give you the names really quick. Walters Art Gallery, $2.1 million. Baltimore Museum of Art, $2.6 million. National Aquarium, almost $600,000. Romo Seltzer Tower, the building, $102,000. BSO, $500,000. The zoo, $1.6 million.
Can you hold up for a second?
Yes, sir.
BSO. I hear a lot of advocacy. I hear a lot of advocacy around the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. I've always had this question, and you are the perfect person to ask. Are there any blacks in the symphony?
I'm not sure of that, but let me finish my point. The Baltimore Convention Center, $22 million. The Hilton Hotel, $12 million. Collectively, these 9 institutions run by white folk got $53 million of our taxpayers' dollars from a city that 2 out of 3 taxpayers look like us. Now, ask the last question: how many blacks shared in any of that $53 million? And this is in Mayor Scott's first budget right now.
Okay, well, I didn't hear you mention the Reginald Lewis Museum, the Great Blacks in Wax Museum.
So the Reginald Lewis Museum is not a black institution. It's not owned and operated by blacks. It was built with state money and is state funded when it's always short or in the red. So it may have the illusion of black exhibits inside, but let's talk about Blacks in Wax Museum, which is black owned.
I have, as you know, we met,
but not like that.
It took me 13 months to get a meeting with this mayor. And after I talked to him in January last year, he said in April that I would meet with Ted Carter, his deputy mayor. That was April 21. So we didn't get an appointment with him until February 10th last week. And then he didn't even show up. 13 months to get an appointment with the mayor. He assigned the deputy mayor to meet with us. Takes 13 months to get the meeting. And then the guy doesn't even show up. And that was February 10th. And it's a week later, and he still hasn't sent any response to the questions that he asked, that I had to submit the topics and the questions in advance for the meeting. I did that on January 28th. Never got the answer, and never got the meeting.
Seems like you maybe appear to them as a hostile.
So I'm not hearing you clear, Donnie.
They don't like you.
Donnie, back to your question.
Oh, they don't like me. Well, see, that's where the problem is in Baltimore. It shouldn't be about who you like or don't like. It should be about whether the policy is reflective of the population of the taxpayers of the city. Whether you like me or not, I know I'm not invited to visit Baltimore anything. I understand, because I've been the one that challenged.
Lou has pissed off people in very high places. Like I said, Lou has laid across the barbed wire fence for black people, and they don't know him. When Lou ever goes on the other side of the mountain, and people reflect, particularly in the state of Maryland, on tourism, black people, Harriet Tubman down the Eastern Shore. You know, Lou was instrumental in forcing the conscious of people to address our needs. Back to your question, Donnie, so we don't leave it empty.
Slow down. You're throwing some facts. You said across the Bay Bridge, the Harriet Tubman statue?
Yeah, and there's also a national park down there as well, a park for Harriet Tubman. There's a multitude of things in Harriet that the Underground Railroad goes that way. They made it a destination. Matter of fact, the state of Maryland promotes it heavily around the country, but it was Lou that touched their conscience decades ago about the inclusion of blacks, where it hasn't taken effect.
Well, that's the case. You weren't alone. If you were on the Eastern Shore, there's certainly, we cannot fail to mention Moon Ying Jackson Amos.
There's no doubt about that. I know who you're speaking of, Donnie. What I'm saying is that where the money comes from, when the money comes from dealing with the state of Maryland and insisting that they market and promote our historical and heritage, you know, Lou Fields led the charge, many instances for decades when others just, you know, kind of resonated and thought about it. But there is, I don't know if you ever heard of Darren Atwater. Have you heard of Darren Atwater, Donnie?
Sure, he did. He does the piece with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. That's the one.
Yeah, so you had mentioned earlier, I thought that you had mentioned earlier about any blacks associated with the symphony orchestra.
No, I did not. I said, are there any blacks who play for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra?
Yeah, that's a new word. That's a new word. That word play is new, but yeah.
I don't see, you're cutting me off. I don't see any musicians, any black musicians, generally speaking. I may have seen one or two in the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. And I say that because it's not like blacks don't play classical music. We've been masters of music, of all things. You go back to Beethoven. I mean, so often we're just, it's just glossed right over. And as a musician myself, born and raised in Baltimore, having met a lot of these musicians, it's a smack in the face when I see the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra asking for money and they have virtually no relationship with Black Baltimore. It's
absolutely. Although they do, Donnie, have Orc Kids. They do sponsor Darren in some form of fashion out in Columbia. They do have Orc Kids. You know that the Peabody, we've got School of the Arts, to your point, that they don't, it's not meaningful. As Lou said, where's the equity? Where's the equity piece? The inclusion piece is getting there, but the equity piece in many of these instances, and that's because old Baltimore is just like Mississippi. Ain't much difference in terms, they just ain't, you know, lynching people up here.
Listen, we've been joined by Leroy McKenzie. He's been
following
this show for the last 45 minutes or so. He wrote so many comments, Lou Fields, there was no way I could deny him. He's got some questions for you. I'll just fall back. Go ahead, Leroy.
His mic is on mute. Dr. McKenzie, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got it.
There
I
you
got
go.
it. Thanks. But this has been a great dialogue, and it's actually, to me, it had brought up some questions that I'm thinking about as you all were talking. But my thing is, I want to get to solutions. Um, and when it comes to the CIAA, which I saw is going to be here, next week and everything like that. My questions had to do with, we're talking about that there were no, black owned businesses in, in that radius there. But my
Radius.
question is, right, but my question is, how long has this been in the plans for the CIAA to come to Baltimore? Because I know that just didn't happen, 6 months ago. Didn't just happen a year ago. That's had to have been in the making for several years. And then what are we doing as black entrepreneurs to prepare those who can take advantage of the CIAA coming here to the city? What are we doing so that, one, I guess this time it won't be necessarily feasible, but if there's the next time that the bid can be put in, what are we doing to have those, more than 5 businesses down in that area where, let's say, in the next 5 years, we're going to have 10, 15, 20 businesses that are in the area that can take advantage of things like that.
Okay, give him a chance to answer, Leroy.
Yeah.
Hey, Dr. McKenzie, good to see you, man. But I'm
You
just
as
very
well.
briefly, because I know Lou has something to say about this. The gatekeepers that we put on that prohibited blacks from being able to, like Lou said, they wanted $10,000 in order for him to market this correctly so it could be a moneymaker for him. We put legislation in the state Senate and legislature for the CIAA specifically that said businesses in our environment had to pay a different liquor license than a normal liquor license,
Mhm.
that they had to pay a fee to enter into it. We could have put a moratorium for small disadvantaged black owned businesses that made it so that they were able, as long as they had proper health licenses, if they were a restaurant, business licenses, hey, we're not going to charge you anything to be part of this process. And the 60,000 square foot convention center or 360,000 square foot of convention center, we're giving black businesses 200,000 rent free or small gatekeeper to set up their businesses inside. That's capital infusion. That's investment. That lowers the gate for us to participate. And then we can judge in the second year whether it was feasible to charge something then because they did well.
Okay, for the sake of time, Mr. Fields, you want to handle Dr. McKenzie's questions?
Yes, I pulled up the latest article on the BSO. It's December 18th, 2020, and it's from a place called the HUB, the Hub, and it's entitled Baltimore Sympathy Works to Increase Racial Equity. So they have one African American who is a cellist, Esther Mellon, Mellon. They hired Jonathan Rush, an African American, as an assistant conductor. So you have 1 out of 75, and then you have an African American assistant director, conductor, and you have 2 blacks on the board for the BSO. That's the latest on that.
It's simply a smack in the face.
But you have to look at Baltimore, and I was about to talk earlier about Baltimore has 2 governments. It's the one we know down at City Hall, but it's another one that we don't see, and that's the power brokers of Baltimore. You might call them the alphabet soup, the GBC, the ABC, the DBCs, and all that crowd. And it's difficult if you're not in that room to effect policies that come out of that crowd. Now, on the other side, you have blacks in the community who really are trying to have quality businesses, competent businesses. But we are hit with more fees, more taxes, not to mention the lack of support from the city during COVID for African-American businesses, particularly in tourism. So what we have is public policies that's being dictated and dominated by people who look like us, but they're answering to a whole nother crowd.
Can you go into that about what the city has done during COVID for Black businesses?
They had some money that came in, early money, and the mayor's office decided to let the applications go through BDC. So Baltimore Development Community Corporation, rather, wrote the eligibility rules and guidelines. And so let's just take an example of our beloved arena players. A lot of the applications, you had to have payroll to qualify for the PPE money. Well, arena players and many of our Black institutions are run by volunteers, so they have no payroll. So now they don't qualify. Then when the new money comes, $641 million, to qualify for that money, after the mayor gave a lot of the city agencies a half of it almost, you had to be, number one, a nonprofit, and then you had to have an ask for $250,000. That knocks out a lot of small Black institutions. So now there's a new pot of money over at BDC again. I know I applied twice, got turned down twice. And most of the times, Blacks in Baltimore have not had one person elected at the city council or the president of the city council or at the mayor's office. We haven't had no cheerleaders, no cheerleaders. So when we come to them about our economic business side of things, and they're looking at things from the public policy side and who owes who or vote for whatever, we have had hard times dealing with the Baltimore committee known as Taxation and Economic Development, which is where we should be sending this data to, and that committee should be trying to effect change in this area. So we have called for a task force on reviewing the COVID-19 funding as it relates to people of color in the city. We've called for a commission on African-American tourism so that we can look at this particular conference, and as Mike is saying, let's do some analytical review after the conference, the money spent, where did it go, and what do we need to do, because they're coming back one more year at least. So next year we might could have some real beautiful businesses near the arena, near the convention center, so that we don't have this hardship of trying to say Black dollars are coming and Black Baltimore can't access them. And I have to give Visit Baltimore a little credit. They're doing more this time around than any time in the past. May not be everything I want, but at least they're trying.
You say
I'm not always going to knock people, because sometimes you got to let public policy run its course. So once this convention is over, the CIAA, we need to have a task force meeting at City Hall or virtually and say, okay, how many people came? How many hotels did they stay in? How many hotels do we as Blacks own? Do we own any Black hotels in this town beyond the 16-room Ivory? Do we own any? Is Michael Haynie in a position to put together a program that we could buy some hotels? We know Michael knows how to run a hotel. He ran the Tremont very well. But why aren't we as Blacks talking about buying some of these hotels? Because you don't own no airlines, you don't own no bus station, you don't own no train station, you don't own a hotel. How you gonna get the big part of the money? That's where the big money going. We're talking about the incidental money that they may spend on food, drinks, and entertainment. The big money is in
what
transportation and accommodations.
Let me jump in. Lou Fields, what elected officials have been supportive of Black business during your career?
The first one comes to mind is Carl Stokes. The second one comes to mind is Leon Pinkett. And for me personally, my operation was started under Kirk Smoke and Danny Henson. They're the ones who got me started.
Interesting.
Now, Sheila Dixon, I don't want to leave out Mayor Dixon. We all believe that if Mayor Dixon had been able to complete her first term and stay mayor for 3, 4, 5 terms, she would have been the best mayor for Black Baltimore. I believe that, and a lot of people do. But because of what happened and how when a person like Marilyn Mosby gets too much power, they send people after you. Whenever you stick your head out, like me, or you, how you doing, Dr. Leroy? You stick your head out for Black people, they coming to see you. I tell you what they've done to me. And all I've done is point out the inequities. They have tried to alienate me.
Tell them, come on down.
They tried to isolate me, and they tried to definitely make sure I don't get paid. But God keeps me paid. But they don't embrace me because I've been the guy that says, well, you put $53 million in the budget. Why no Blacks? and I don't get off of that. And so you pay a price. Marilyn Mosby, Sheila Dixon, Cassie Pugh, Cassie shouldn't have went to jail for that crap. Marilyn Mosby right now, according to former agent Tyrone Powers, he stated emphatically, we don't prosecute people for that kind of stuff she's doing. But if you stick your head out for black people, you pay a price in this country, and you pay a price even in Black Baltimore. A person like me should be applauded, appreciated, to showing the inequities in the city that we are the majority taxpayers, but we see white institutions getting our tax dollars to build their infrastructure. I just told you who got the money, $53 million. And in addition to the budgets they already have. Arena Players, our social club, Vulcan Blazer, Great Blacks and Whites, Black American Museum, Unity Blake Museum, got no money. So how can they prepare for CIAA? They have no budget. They're struggling over there. They can't run a shuttle bus. Any of them institutions I just mentioned should have a shuttle bus that could go to that arena and pick up people. Oh, you want to come to Great Blacks and Whites? You want to come to Urban League? You want to come to Arena Players? You know what they are doing? They hired 3 motor coaches. And these 3 motor coaches, God, I'm just hoping it's a black bus company at least. But these 3 motor coaches will run shuttle services all day downtown Baltimore doing CIAA. They're hitting the hotel, the Royal Farms, and the BCC. They're not stopping at one black business.
Lou Fields used to be president of the Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce. I didn't hear you mention them during this conversation. Where are the Black Chamber?
Well, the chamber has new leadership, and they are now in communications, in discussions with the BDCs, with the mayor's office, and they have been included in discussions. But the leadership of the chamber is still trying to figure out how to take power.
What about
if you're the Black Chamber, you got to take some power.
What about the Baltimore City Chamber? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike Haynie, you wanted to jump in.
Oh, no, Johnny, I know that we're short on time. All I want to say is that I believe that this...
Actually, thanks to your support, we are able to now broadcast multiple shows at one time, Mr. Haynie.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. I just want to say that I believe, as Lou said, that power we have to take, and we have to learn how to protect each other. We have to learn how to protect the Mosbys. We have to, Sheila Dixon is not in power because of, as Lou said, what she would have done and what they know that she would have done. That's it, man. You either stand for something or you fall for anything. And that's what they said about our national leadership. Who is willing to sacrifice? Dr. Martin Luther King knew the day before he died, he was going to die. He wasn't afraid to take a bullet for a cause. And some of us aren't willing to do 2 days behind the penitentiary for a cause, and he took a bullet. What is your cause that you're going to be behind and be willing to take a bullet for? Where is our leadership? And, to the CIAA's credit, they are using Baltimore, my estimation. They are leveraging Baltimore for Charlotte, which I believe they're going to return. They're going to return to Charlotte. I think they're going to give Baltimore 1 more year because it only makes perfect sense, the proximity down there. They made astronomical money down there. They said, hey, what happens when you miss something? When you miss something, you realize what you miss, you bring it back, you negotiate differently. That was the smartest thing they did, was to take it out of Charlotte for a bit, because Charlotte got used to it, and they're going to go back to Charlotte a bit stronger. That's just my belief.
So what should Baltimore be doing?
Looking at other things other than putting all the eggs in one basket. When Rural Farms Arena is rehabbed, they may have the ability to market more.
Do we keep the same people in place?
Well, I think that we are dealing with a one-term mayor. I think that Al Hutchinson has done a great job in terms of doing as best he can with the power that he has, but we have not, as a community, backed him and held his hand or held his feet to the fire to ensure that Black businesses are successful. But as I said at the top of the hour, our power is not real, it's apparent. As Black people, our power is apparent. It is what they give us, instead of, as Lou said, what we take. and we
Leroy
have to be in a
McKenzie, you want
position
to
to
chime
change.
in before we close out?
No, my thing to Mr. Fields and to Mr. Haynie, how can, and it has to do with what you were asking, Donnie, how can Baltimore leverage having the CIAA here, and even if it doesn't return, what other events or things such as the CIAA can Baltimore get into in order to be able to have the growth that Charlotte, I'm sure Charlotte has benefited tremendously,
Hmm.
from black business perspective, and how can Baltimore mimic that or do kind of use that as the same way to be able to, build our city like that.
We got Howard, we got Cooperative. Everything's around our athletic prowess. And let's look at Atlanta, Georgia, and that race between, what's happening down there, our athletic prowess. Why does it always have to be our athletic prowess?
Right.
Why can't it be, as Donnie said, the black assistant conductor, or Lou said the black assistant conductor, or the cellist? Why can't we look at other aspects of drawing business that are
Right.
beneficial to the community at large, just not black businesses per se, but we need to take a lead, but they bank on our athletic prowess and say, hey, that's what it is. I mean, when Lou mentioned Under Armour Performance Center, their first event this Saturday, remember what that used to be?
Nothing.
You remember? No, it used to be the Carmela Anthony Center.
Oh, you're talking about
Oh
Fayette
wow.
Street?
So they changed the name from a money economic perspective from the Carmelo Anthony Center to the
On,
Under Armour Center.
on Fayette
Wow.
Street.
What is, and they did it from a money perspective, but that's what that is. It's at the Under Armour Performance Center Saturday, but that used to be Carmelo's center. And so what do we really own? What do we really take? What do we really insist? How do we come together and coagulate, gel as a community to really have some power? They count on our ability and what we do in terms of, just disengaging and not collectively as a community. And it's unfortunate.
Mhm. Okay. Well, gentlemen, there's Lou's website, bdxlive.biz, bdxlive.biz. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, all for chiming in. This is an important discussion. One thing that I didn't get to ask either one of you, including you, Dr. McKenzie, do we still suffer from classism in Baltimore? I mean, just look at our history as a people. Now, what I'm noticing, especially as it relates to the CIAA, it's almost like there are two classes of black people. You have your accomplished professionals, they certainly don't live anywhere near North Avenue, closer to the Beltway, maybe Randallstown, maybe Owings Mills. Maybe they lack a connection to Dunbar, to McKim's, to Poe Holmes. Leroy, let's start with you. Do we still start from the isms here in Baltimore? Because as Haynie was talking about, he mentioned certain names, and these are the same names that are always here. I don't see any expansion. Do we still suffer from the isms?
Well, I don't say that we suffer from the isms. I think it's more a mindset than an ism, to
Okay,
me.
so that's a no.
Right.
Okay, Lou Fields, are we still stuck in Willie Lynch?
I think right now we're moved into, as we would say, cliques. Baltimore is a town of cliques. And if you're in this clique, you might not be welcome in that clique. If you come up like I did with a Robert Clay, you might not be as popular with somebody who's not a friend of Robert Clay. If you're a fan of the work that Ray Haysburg did, you might not be a fan of those who oppose him. And what I see in Baltimore, the two words I would say is the most important words that dictate everything we finished talking about, the two words. It's not personalities, it's public policy. Donald Schaefer, Mayor Schaefer, in 1978, put the policies in today that we are still trying to change to make better for people of color. In 1978, I'm not saying Mr. Schaefer was doing things on a racial basis. He was just trying to help people who could help him build the city up again. So he created things. He created Visit Baltimore. He staffed it with the same lady who's the chairperson at the Baltimore Convention Center now. And he was really trying to make the city better, but he was looking at it through an all-white lens, which is still the lens we're looking at it through today. When CIAA came, I said to Visit Baltimore, I'm putting aside our grievances. I'm gonna do everything I can to make this conference the best it can make. But still, because I've challenged them on their public policies, I'm not at the CIAA table.
Mike Haynie, do we still have the paper bag test going on in our community?
Hey, Donnie, there's no doubt about it. You know, inside
Right
the subculture of Black people, we have class society that white people have purposely made us take our eye off the prize and materialistic value in our own community, the has and the have-nots. You know, that's why at Randallstown, we moved out there. You know what I'm saying? Away from Baltimore City, get away from those. We even call our own selves the N-word or nigger, you know, getting away from it, you know. So it is unfortunate. It's unfortunate. You know, the biggest crime is the mind perceiving that somebody else is different than you for materialistic value. And that's what we're seeing in our community.
Having gone to Morehouse, I couldn't believe I would run into certain brown paper bag type of isms in Baltimore at an HBCU. I couldn't believe it. How in the hell can you go to Morgan and be bougie? Okay, we got to go. That's enough for now. My name's Donnie Glover. Lou Fields, let's put his website back up. Lou Fields, I got to challenge you because you wouldn't respect me if I didn't.
You know, get the news before the news. B1news.com. That's all I can tell you.
Mr. Haynie, Dr. McKenzie, you have a beautiful day.
Man, we appreciate you, man.
Thank you all.
Keep fighting, Lou.
We appreciate you. Everybody. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Haynie, I got a question for you once we get all. Oh, he left. Don't.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, Donnie hasn't ended the broadcast yet.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good day.
You want me to end it, Donnie?
Sure.
Talk to you, Leroy.